All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Charbrion Plummer. I am one of the co-directors of programs at Three Walls, along with my colleague Adia, who is also here with us. I am a Black woman with locks and a shaved head. I'm wearing a fluorescent green sweater shirt with glasses, and I'm at home with a window behind me with gray curtains, and to my left are windows with brown shades. And we are excited to have you join us tonight, and thank you for your interest in the In Session Fellowship. For those who don't know, should you be selected, I am the person that you will be working most closely with here at Three Walls, but you will come over time to get to know Adia as well as Jeffrey Hayes, our executive director. Before we get into the Q&A, feel free if you have questions that are percolating, keep those, write those down, jot them so you don't lose them. But for context, I would just like to provide a little background to inform you about Three Walls, who we are, what we do, as well as the fellowship, and just some commonly asked FAQs. And then from there, we can dive into your exact questions, if that sounds good. So at Three Walls, our mission is to foster contemporary art practices that respond to lived experiences, encouraging connections beyond art. And a way that I kind of like to frame that or push that further is we support artists, we adore working with artists, but we also recognize that for our work, art is sort of the vehicle to get us to the destination, which is fostering and supporting relationships and also redefining maybe how we look at visual art and how artists are supported. We exclusively support Alana artists or artists of color, depending on how you state it, but we prefer to utilize Alana. And we are very, very keen on relationships. I will just pause for a second so our friend can connect to audio. Perfect. Welcome, welcome. So we're just diving into what Three Walls does and what In Session is. So it's important to us that we cultivate relationship and collaboration. So this fellowship is more than just an award. You work really closely and intimately with us. We center Black labor practices and pay careful attention to and honor the work of Black folks, especially Black women and femmes. This is a Black woman-led organization. We like to be very explicit about that. And in addition to the cultural nuance, we do our best to approach our work through this very intersectional lens, understanding the labor, the gendered aspects of the labor and the work that we do, the racialized aspects, how all of those things intersect. And we lead with a Black feminist ethic that is very important to us. And you'll see that represented throughout. Most importantly, we lead with an ethic of care. We center the holistic humanity of not just everyone we work with, but ourselves. That being said, we are a small but mighty team of three. So we do a lot of great work with a really small team, but we also have the privilege and honor of working really closely with the folks that do enter into our fellowships, and we sort of scale them the way we do for that reason. You're joining us today because you're interested in Session. In Session is one of our sort of anchor fellowship programs. And for those that may not know, In Session in 2017 was reimagined by our ED, Jeffrey Hayes. And the reason why that happened the way that it did is because prior to, as you might have seen in the promotion, et cetera, on our website, we have salons, we have these other engagements. Folks wanted more time with us. They wanted mentorship, they wanted a sounding board, they wanted more time to interface with staff and sort of holistic support for their practices and what they were shaping. So from that, we reimagined it. And so now you have, in addition to the financial aspect, the award that you get these one-on-ones with us, with me in particular, through our study sessions. So should you be awarded the fellowship, you should know that you would be asked to commit to a 7-month process of these study sessions that take place twice a month, usually in the evenings. And if you can't make it, we ask that you commit to all, but if you can't make it, your collaborator at least would need to be there if anything comes up with extenuating circumstances. And part of the reason for us structuring it this way is because with the reading list that you saw online, we really dig into those texts together. We talk through your process. We talk through your understanding of what they represent, what they mean for you, how they tie into the theme. It is meant for you to have a cohort to go through this work together, right? So in addition to having your collaborator, which I should say it's really important that we work in pairs because we want that accountability when it comes to producing your salon and examining these works together, but you also have a cohort that you can go to, that you can build from. And we find that there's an intimacy and a closeness that tends to develop over that time once you go through the fellowship with your peers. So in addition to that, we also have something called the Wellness Circle. The Wellness Circle allows us to, again, provide this sort of level of holistic support. We are mindful of practicing justice and fair and equitable living wage. So that's where that stipend comes in, and it was increased previously. So you have $21,000. So $2,500 of that is your artist fee that you get awarded over those 7 months. And then you get an additional $500 per month for health and wellness, meaning health insurance, et cetera. And then these wellness circle engagements allow us to do a couple of things. First, it's important to note that accessibility is key and really important and central to all of our work. We are really, really big on disability justice. It is integral to what we do. We believe that we can't espouse the values of extending care and caring about our most vulnerable communities if we don't center that. So you'll have engagements with Access Living, who do a really great job of figuring out not only how you can support your salons in a really accessible way, but also just to sort of provide you with the tools and resources needed to either be an ally or to refine what it is that you're already doing in your life and practice. And that'll actually be one of your first workshops. In addition to that, we work with another group Together and Through, and they provide mental health and wellness support. So you would have access to them for sessions to talk through different things. And then we also have support in the digital space, the digital marketing space, with another facilitator who can help with that as well. So in addition to meeting with these folks with your cohort and with our other cohort here at Three Walls, you also get independent one-on-one time, so office hours, so to speak. So we have study sessions, we have wellness circle, and let's see, I'm trying to make sure I have everything for you. Oh, your salons, I'm sorry. Your salons take place April through June. So just for context, Three Walls, we work, of course, year round, but take both August and December off, but you still get paid through that time. But December is a time that you can use to ideate, meet with your collaborators, do what you want. But your salons themselves will take place April, May, and June. And so we're kind of in the thick of that now. If you look at our Instagram or you look at our website, you can find more information about those. You can look at how they're promoted, what they entail, what they've covered. I'll actually be posting some stills and photos from previous ones really soon in the coming week. So you'll be able to get a little taste of what that is. And typically we try to keep those really intimate. We are a quality over quantity sort of institution in that it's not just about how many people show up, but it's about the richness of the engagement itself of the salon. And so we really want to create an intimate space where folks can show up, be themselves, take this journey with you, you take them through your process, and also cultivate vulnerability with folks. That is also a core tenet of who we are and what we hope to bring. So typically they are between 20, maybe 25 folks, but usually 20 is that sweet spot. And they tended to be these really beautiful events where the sort of kinship and things that are cultivated in our study sessions with your peers tend to carry over to the salons, and also allow space for that engagement with folks and for them to show up and sort of be themselves. This year, we piloted a hybrid model. So in addition to having it in person, we work with a videographer to stream via Zoom. So we're really working through how to make sure folks feel engaged, not just witnessing through Zoom, through the camera, but also they're able to interface with you and engage. And we will, of course, talk more about that if you're a part of this upcoming fellowship. I will pause there just to regroup. Let's see, with our FAQs, I'll transition a little bit. As I emphasized a second ago, partner, collaborator is a must. If you are interested, but you don't have a collaborator, unfortunately, you would be deemed ineligible. So it's important that you're applying with someone. It's about that accountability and that relationship building, being a part of this community. Speaking of community, it's important that you live within Chicago versus Chicagoland sort of broadly conceived. At least one person must. and your salon would need to take place in that neighborhood. As far as the reading list is concerned, those resources are really meant to sort of be a launch point and a guide for the theme. You are welcome to bring others if there's something that is really sitting with you and you feel like it's relevant. You can bring that to us within your application, but it's important that we see and understand, excuse me, we see and understand how it's tying into what we're asking you to explore. So you would need to be clear about that. Just to talk about timeline a little bit, the applications currently closed on the 15th. Following that, we have a community committee that engages in adjudication. We review the applications with them. They go over things, give feedback, and then a couple of weeks after that, late July, we announce the fellows before we go on our first break. Another thing to note is that should you be advanced for further consideration following the jury panel, we will reach out to you for an interview. So we'll talk to you one-on-one, get to dig into your application. We know there's only a few things that we can catch via a piece of paper, right, or via something digital. So we want to interface with you and get to know you and understand how you interpret the theme and also how you dig into things. Another point about the theme itself, bearing witness, that was really birthed out of us seeing a need and also just a desire from within ourselves, within our respective communities of folks really desiring to feel seen, to feel affirmed, but in a way that doesn't always lead with our trauma or put our traumas on Front Street or have those be the sort of anchoring things that allow us to bear witness. We feel like although our traumas are serious and those are things that might shape our overall lived experience, we believe that Black folks deserve joy, we deserve liberation in ways that don't always start with suffering. So it's our hope that you'll engage with the theme and sort of reimagine what that could look like and what that could be for you in community with others. And if you have other questions about that too, I'm happy to answer those. So I'll pause to catch my breath, but also to give some space for any questions that you might have. And you can feel free to unmute your mic or put them in the chat, and I'll just answer them in the order that they come in.
I have a question. I'm wondering if for the interview process, if that's done with you and your partner, or are those conducted individually?
You would be interviewed together.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so even, thank you for asking that, because that brings me to a question. Sometimes we get, like my collaborator and I, we're supposed to apply separately. No, you fill out one application. So everything that you are working on or doing, the intention is that you're doing that together. And that we understand how you're viewing that. Of course, like individually, you'll have your own sort of points of entry, but really, how are you moving through the text and the experience as a unit? It's really important for us to see. Other questions, be it the application, the process, what comes after?
I actually have another question.
Sure.
I know that there's options to do digital submissions. If you were doing a video or a voice note, and sorry if this was already on the website, is there a time limit on those?
We don't, but I would say one thing that might be helpful for you is to, if you were to, let's say, just jot some notes out. A practice that I've seen work well is if you jot your notes out and you answer the questions in like a format that works for you, reading through that would probably give you like a solid sort of examination, because each one, we don't want to necessarily limit you and say it has to be this. We want your thoughts to be clear and articulated in a way that flows for you. But just for the sake of sort of guiding us through, it might be best to do that. And another thing we ask is if you choose a format that isn't like text or a PDF, that you just follow the questions and the layout that we have. It helps our committee members still be able to follow and like give the same consideration without having to sort of piece together things for you. So I would say if you are going through, you would say, in question one, you ask this, or you say, in response to question one, and then give your reply that way, but have it be whatever feels best for you.
I had a question. My given name is Javonna, but my chosen name is Ja. You'll probably see both on the application. But just so you know. Hello. You may hear my cat meowing in the background. But I was wondering, as far as the sessions, once the fellowship has started, will those be virtual or in person or a combination?
They're all virtual, so they're all via Zoom. And at the end of the fellowship, we'll probably do, which is kind of what we're doing now, a convening where we like break bread together and debrief that way. But all of the sessions are held virtually for now.
And as far as the, I guess, location for where the salon will take place, if it's somewhere or if the program entails some sort of like art installation, whether that's like publicly or like indoors, is that something that you all will be able to like facilitate as far as like permits and stuff like that? Is that something that we should take into consideration when thinking about a program, like permits and guidelines and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I don't necessarily want to put limitations on your practice, but I will say if your salon entails you needing a permit, then you might want to scale that down some. And I say that because we want you to activate what you're doing as best as you need or you want, right? So however you feel like you want to create that point of entry for folks, that's great. It's less about you presenting like a final culminating artwork and more about you being in dialogue with folks and really digging into process. So this fellowship is more focused on process than it is final outcome. So a lot of fellowships and residencies might say by the end of this, we expect you to have 5 works produced, or we want this large grandiose thing. It's less about that and more about you having something in your neighborhood that if it's not already a relationship that forges a relationship with that place within this neighborhood, so that folks, as they come, not only are they experiencing you, but they're experiencing this place and maybe experiencing art in a setting or a backdrop that may be non-traditional. So we've had salons at sort of creative co-working spaces. We just had one last month that was at one of the parks in a nature center because both of the collaborators had a practice that centered a lot of working with the land and things like that. So it's more so centered around that versus you saying like, okay, I need this final sort of output at the end. And I say all that to say as well that you might want to consider, how are you being open to emergence? Because although you may have an idea of where things could head, it's important that we understand that you are flexible and open enough to seeing what emerges over the course of the 7 months. So it's not that you necessarily have to have, you don't need to come and say by the end of this, we're gonna have the sculpture up, we're gonna do this thing or do that thing, but rather here is what we would like to explore. And here is how we are approaching this through a process lens versus an outcome focused lens.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate that. And you're right. A lot of fellowships work from like a sort of different framework. And so it's almost kind of like a reprogramming of like thinking about outcomes and processes. And so that's very helpful. In terms of like when it actually comes to the salons, our fellows, like what does the process look like in terms of like choosing your salon date? Is that given or are people able to choose the time frame and the date?
Yeah, so I will have some potential dates selected, and then should you say, well, we really would love this for this reason, like it's not that rigid that we wouldn't be open to it, but for ease of having spaciousness and having enough space to like prepare for one, promote one, and then give some breathing room and allow folks to ease into the next one, I'll have somewhat of a framework already developed. You saying that though brings me back to something that I should have stated before, which is sort of just few logistical points. With your salons, in addition to the stipend that you get as a fellow, we provide you with a material stipend. So you'll have a stipend to spend on materials, but we, meaning Three Walls, covers the cost of the venue. So once you decide on the space you want, we enter into contract with that space for your salon. And then of course you continue to work with them to decide how you want to lay things out, how that looks. But in the interim, we sort of handle that back end piece. We also support with, of course, like videography, archiving, things like that. We want to keep it intimate, so it's not something that we publicly broadcast, but you will have some form of documentation through video and photo. We also support with a group that we work with that does online facilitation, so they kind of act as that bridge and help you think through that. And we also, anything with accessibility, so we'll have captioning, we have someone that does Spanish translation in real time that will be on the Zoom call as well, so things like that, just as an FYI.
I think that pretty much answered my last question that I had actually, but just to clarify so that I understand.
Sure.
So this won't be public, sorry, my cat. This won't be anywhere, this won't live anywhere publicly after the program, but we will have some sort of content, whether that's like video content. And as far as like accessibility, because we were talking about having like signing or something like that, being able to have some sort of accessibility. You're saying that you all would be able to provide that as well?
Yes, so with anything related to accessibility and those costs, we cover and support with. And with the archival piece, so like on our website, we might have some stills that don't necessarily focus in on like one person, but might give a feeling of the event. That is usually the extent to which we will do that. But online, it's not like we're going to have an album with all these pictures from your salon or a video that lives on YouTube or Vimeo, because so much of what is shared is often from a very personal and vulnerable place. We want to respect folks' privacy, and what they're bringing to that moment. But you will have things to support your practice, because we know it's important for you to also have, documentation and things like that as an artist.
Awesome, that's beautiful. And I think you answered this already, but sorry, I didn't hear all of it. If you wouldn't mind going over just kind of how that schedule works with like the pay. I think you said something about like 500 for something or like 2,500 for something like that. I didn't hear all of that. I'm sorry.
The fellowship award is 21,000 total, and that is 3,000 per month over a 7-month period. So when your fellowship starts, it's awarded over a 7-month period. And from there, you would essentially invoice us for $3,000. 2,500 of that is considered your fee. So as artists, we know sometimes when you sign up for events or you agree to do a talk or you agree to do a show, there's so much labor that goes into that sort of back end prep. But oftentimes institutions don't account for that, right? They just say, okay, here's what we have, and you work with that. It's important to us to acknowledge that labor, so that fee is to recognize the labor that goes into you having your study sessions, doing research, reading with us, doing all these things with us to prep for that end result. And then the other 500, so that 25 is first, the other 500 that makes up the 3,000 is considered a health and wellness stipend or support. So those funds can go into health plan, things like that, et cetera, that you need. So when we do our sort of invoicing cycle every month, those two things are notated, and you would essentially invoice us for the 3,000, and then we would pay that to you.
I have a question. I'm interested in the selection process as far as like the type of artists you all are interested in, like choosing the variations. Like, I know I can't remember the exact number of pairs.
I'm sorry, you sound a little far from us. I can't hear you as well now.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
I was curious about the selection of artists, like the type of artists that you're deciding to choose. I know it wasn't a huge number of pairs that would be chosen. And so is it that you all are choosing like some audio, some visual, or is there like intention with you all about who in the type of media or the type of art that's being done that lends itself to who is being selected?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are 3 pairs, so 6 artists total, 3 pairs. And really the process is about alignment and how we feel that you both are looking at the theme and the fit with that, and also your overall practice and approach to how it is that you understand art, how open you are to research and being process oriented. So it's less about saying, okay, we want to curate the season where we need one visual person, one person working this way, one person working in that way. It's really more so a matter of fit and alignment with values, with how you understand the theme and the process of the fellowship itself, and how you're able to articulate your vision for how you will engage in what it is that we're asking you to explore and how you're inviting others in.
Okay, thank you. And can that exploration be integrating an idea or research or a project that you have already started to conceptualize or gather data for? Or is it about creating an original artwork or about being in the process of creating something original?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say we have folks who, of course, bring elements of their practice or who they are. If you are, I would say, if you already come in with something prepackaged that you feel like this is what I need to see through and this is a vehicle for it, that may not be the best, because that sort of, you in some ways are very attached to a specific outcome, right? But if there's
Right.
flexibility and you have something that maybe is a seed that exists in you, that this could be a sort of space to explore that more deeply and then see what comes from it, that would probably be a more thoughtful approach to have. Just because so much of what we are exploring, you can't really know until you're there, right? Because you have you have a collaborator, you also have 4 other people, well, 5 including your collaborator, that you're interfacing with. There are things that might come up, and we'll continue to sort of talk through those sorts of things together. But that's not to say you have to shy away from what it is that you're already working on. Elements of who you are ultimately will come up. But yeah, just knowing that it's probably best if you don't have as much rigidity, because that doesn't necessarily always allow for thoughtful collaboration or emergence or an ability for us to engage and have feedback with one another. So I should say also, it's not just a matter of like, okay, you're in your study sessions, we'll talk, okay, bye. Me personally, I interface really closely with you as fellows, talk through your ideas. So over the course of the study sessions, it's not just me sort of lecturing or anything like that. We are in conversation with one another, and you also present to your peers. They give you feedback. We give you feedback. So it is a very collaborative process, and it's sort of different than maybe, especially if you're a visual artist, than working like in your studio in isolation. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Awesome.
That gives me even more to think about. And then my last question is about this fellowship and like who. So like, I believe I saw a line, and I don't have like it highlighted, but about there being those who are fellows from a different cohort or a different fellowship that you all awarded, not being able to be awarded this one. That's the first part. Like, is it that, someone has a fellowship already with Three Walls and they wouldn't be able to apply for this, or are there time parameters around that? And then this other part is this an annual, you may have said that in the beginning, but I came in a little bit late. Is this an annual fellowship, or would it happen in it just you choose the years that the funds are available?
Yes. So all great questions. To answer your first, yes. So if you have previously been awarded a fellowship, you would be deemed ineligible to apply. There are other ways that we continue our relationships with all of our fellows for a variety of things. So that's not to say, once you finish your fellowship, you'll never hear from us again, but rather we try our best to open this up as a new opportunity for others to come in who may not necessarily have gone through any of our programs before. For your second question around annually, yes. So it's this fellowship in particular, we have others that extend over a longer period, but in session specifically is over the course of a year.
Okay.
It should be noted that the themes change annually too. So this year's bearing witness, next year will be something different.
Mm, mm. Okay, thank you so much. I think this is such a unique, and I think as someone else who asked questions echoed this, but it is such a unique process to be able to say, like, I'm going to get support in thinking about this and generating ideas about this. Like, that is really not necessarily something I see, and I'm always looking. So thank
I
you.
know, I appreciate that, and I'm really glad that that came through. If Jeffrey was here, she'd probably say it too. It's really important to us so much, and you'll learn this really quickly should you be selected. So much of what we do is around sitting and thinking and researching, like even as staff, that's a part of our respective practices and processes, not just outside of work, but also at work. We read together, we do different things together, we discuss things as a team. And we know that so often as artists, there might be things that you need time and space to sit with, but depending on the application, especially if it's project-based, you have a pressure to say, okay, well, you have to focus in this way, or I have to write this thing to fit this just right. No, we want you to dive into process. We want you to be able to sit with things, to reflect on them, to revisit them, to get feedback, to have people and a sounding board and trusted voices to bounce things off of. So I'm really glad that you feel that and that came through for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like Nate, did I see you come off mute a second ago?
Yes, you did. I just wanted to make sure everyone else first got a chance to speak, but if anyone else has a question, go ahead. I don't mind waiting. Also, just side note, it's very awesome to see a bunch of beautiful Black people on this call. So
Yeah,
that's great. I'll let anyone else who has a question first go though.
thank you.
Agreed. I second that, Nate. I love it. Love the melanin. What you just said kind of made me think of another question that I'm still forming here, but I'm wondering, with the final salon, is the expectation for us to have, I guess, like a fully flushed program or like understanding of the text, or is that too a part of that collaborative like process, like you were saying? Like, I know we're going to collaborate with our partners and collaborate with the other fellows and collaborate with you, the support, and your folks at Three Walls. But in terms of like the actual salon, are we then bringing what we've developed to folks and then creating this program, or are we continuing this dialogue at the salon, if that makes sense?
Yes. So I would say both and, meaning, and I should have said this earlier, the salon is only an hour and a half. So you have condensed time, right? So it's not like you're expected to create this long night of programming. It's really a conversation. You should be rooted enough in your text to be able to talk things through it. So part of sort of our mission and thinking about like how we create experiences that push beyond sort of art as we know it is that we might have folks who come who may not be artists, who might not be in the arts, who might not know art speak. How are you inviting folks in and having art maybe be the central thing that they gather around, but it doesn't have to be the thing that sort of is the leading thing. As artists, you have a way of interpreting things beautifully. You have things you might want to present creatively, and that's wonderful. But it's really intended to be a conversation that you yourself, after having spent 7 months with it, right, can facilitate enough. You don't have to be, an associate professor and be able to recite it cover to cover, but you should have enough of a grasp to be able to create just a broad sort of overview and point of entry, but also to shape questions, thoughts, things that feel resonant to you around that. And from there, invite others in through a sort of questioning or an interrogation. So in past salons, we've had folks who have come in and actually done like some sort of activation through movement in addition to having dialogues and conversations. We have folks who have journaled with people. Even at our last salon, in addition to reflecting through questions, there were these moments of deep reflection and mindfulness where they had folks like getting their hands in the dirt and working on things. But above all else, they should understand what is the text or what are the resources that are grounding this conversation, and have enough of a framework for that. And then maybe provide points of entry, however that looks for you, for them to then come in and sort of place themselves in that with you. So you're modeling that exploration and that vulnerability to say, like, this is how this feels relevant to me, my practice, this is what has come up for me when engaging with these things. What comes up for you when presented with these questions, prompts, reflections, visuals, whatever the case might be. And in some ways, this is also meant to kind of pull that curtain back. So to kind of restate what I alluded to earlier, you know, when you get to an exhibit, you hear or you see like art on the wall, you see a performance, you hear music, you hear a performance, but there's so much that goes into that culmination, right? That folks finally get to see that they may have no idea about unless like a curator frames it. So this is sort of that in-between space. Before you get to this next thing, before you get to this culmination, before you get to this exhibit, we use whatever, you know, descriptor you want to use. What is that in between that gets you there? And that is really what this is zeroing in on.
Gotcha. Thank you.
These are great questions, y'all. It's like, oh yeah, this makes me excited all over again. We get excited, but we're so close to it that when other people ask the questions, like, yes, yes, this is great. Other thoughts?
I thought that question before was really good because I'm looking over the application now, and basically one of my main wonders was what the salon would look like, and I think you answered that really well as far as somewhat of an in-between space between the explanation or the kind of interpretation of the artwork or the text or whatever it's based on, and sort of how that gets activated and sort of acted out in real time and real space. So I guess my only question remaining is sort of this year's theme, bearing witness. I read that it's less about the bearing witness of trauma or bearing witness of something that is sort of horrifying or triggering, but more so something that could be celebrated, or something that just brings you joy, I guess. So I was wondering if I don't know, I guess if you could speak more to where that came from, and like where did you guys sort of ideated and what made you guys want to pick this theme. Maybe it would give us some clarity or some insight into kind of your guys' thought process around the theme itself.
Yes, I would love to. That's a great question. And something you said actually sparked a point that I think is important to emphasize. So it's not just us saying like, all right, we want y'all to read. Now go read these texts. It's about also challenging what is considered a seminal text or a really important cultural text. If you have, I mean, we've all been through some sort of educational system that may not have had us and our culture in mind, right? And if you think, okay, what are the things people say we have to read? If you, whether you got your MFA or BA or whatever the case might be, we can all probably think of a moment or multiple examples of people telling us, these are the things that sort of anchor art history, and we are removed from it. So what we chose with intention, because we feel like it is important to let folks know and help them to understand there are cultural texts, resources, things that anchor who we are, that track who we are, that tell a completely different story, and that have their own historical trajectory that are just as important, if not more important, than these things that center whiteness. So that's point number one that I wanted to articulate. To your question about the theme, so often, and I'll speak to it because I spent a lot of time with it really closely. So I could just kind of speak personally and also from an organizational perspective. I find that very often within institutional settings, in life in general, but especially if folks are talking about Blackness or they're asking folks to interrogate Blackness, in spaces that aren't necessarily for us but want to feature us, we are asked to sort of lead with things that put our pain, put our traumas, put our things on Front Street. And not only are they often put on Front Street, but then we're asked to sort of dig into them and pick them apart or qualify them in certain ways and have to explain them to people only to be gaslit and told they don't understand what we mean by these things. And we see that happen. It's a pattern historically. Internally, we talk a lot about world building, dreaming, visioning. So while the emphasis is on joy, and I mean joy broadly conceived, I don't think joy has to be embodied as like a, hey, I'm smiley today, I'm so bubbly, whatever. Like, it is a joy to be here with y'all. And just before this call, I was talking to Adia, it's been a rough day. So I can possess joy without feeling like I have to also embody it in certain ways, but it's a feeling, it is a thing that sustains me. And it is a thing that is counter to me saying like, okay, because of this trauma, like I now have to continue to fight. What would it look like for me to necessarily not have to invoke these things in response to that pain, or to feel like I have to quantify it or qualify it in that way? So it's really important for us to be able to have space to just dream, to build, to ideate in ways that allow us to remove ourselves from that. It's inevitable. We go through things every day that remind us who we are, what we look like, things that have happened to us generationally, things that have been passed down to us, things that our bodies and our cells hold, that cellular memory. We have reminders of that every single day. And so especially with phones, with technology, with all of these things, we are constantly met with that. So how do we continue to counter that in a way that maybe allows us to also retool? Because I think in addition to folks making demands of us, there are times where if we aren't mindful, we also lead with that subconsciously, and we don't have to. So in order for Black folk to just live, survive, and internally we talk a lot about just being able to just be. What does it mean to just be? And how do we witness that for one another? How do we, just as we sit and we mourn and we grieve and we hold that space for those really hard moments, how do we also do the same for things that feel celebratory or just might seem mundane or like every day, but they're still great? And like a really simple example that might seem silly, but we do it, is like, you know, if you're walking down the street and let's say I see Job and you have on some shoes I like, and you walk by, you say, okay, shoes. And it's like, you see it. And you're seeing this other person, you are witnessing like this person being self-determined. They put that thought and intention into like how they want it to go out into the world today. And you're seeing that. That's a really simple and sort of watered down explanation. But I think societally, we spend a lot of time, it's really easy to get like caught up in the frustrating things. And I would say from a personal standpoint, this was also a moment of accountability for me as I was writing the theme, because I'm like, yeah, I think there are moments where like I'll fuss and I'll stew and I will sit with things that like might not feel as bad, or moments where I thought I could have made a better decision, or things that feel really hurtful. But the minute something good happens, it's like, okay, great, now I'm on to the next thing. And I don't have time to exist within that. And I don't give myself the spaciousness to like, let me see what this feels like. Let me actually embody this. Let me see and interrogate what this means and allow myself to really hold that, because I deserve that, especially as a Black woman, like every day surviving within this world. But sometimes we also feel like we have to earn that and give ourselves permission for it, when simply we should just be and allow space for that. So hopefully that gives you some insight into like how and why and the pathway into it. But if you have more specific questions, I'm always happy to elaborate.
Yeah, I thought that was really amazingly put. And then also too, I don't think your example was watered down at all. I think to your point before about simply existing or just enjoying life, there's something about, like, I was just at my niece's dance recital, and like that in itself was amazing because I got to see all the stuff that she'd been working on.
Mhm.
And I was like, dang, I remember when you were born. And there was while it was a very sort of like deep and like enlightening moment, it wasn't anything other than just witnessing her life and her growing up. So I'll keep that in mind when like looking through the text and all that stuff. But just in general, I think in all of our lived experiences, we can find a lot of examples and inspiration to pull from. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. We love the little ones. And it is so true. I think kids in particular offer a way for us to like rethink how we're viewing things around us or just seeing the world. It's so easy to forget that that innocence and like that joy and experiencing these things for the first time. So hopefully in that active witnessing, I think what you're also naming is kind of this entry point into mindfulness, and not in the like healy way that it's been so like repackaged, no slight to anyone engaging in like their own self-care in different ways, but like what it means to really sit with moments like that and define for yourself like why they feel significant, allows us a spaciousness that both, I think there's a way that we typically rush through life just because of like societally how things are framed. But also, yeah, it's something that sometimes is very easy to get away from. So it's my hope that when you think through some of this, maybe there's space and there's room for you to re-enter into that sort of a practice, or maybe even spark that if you don't already have one. Y'all have really great questions. I just have to say, Adia's like, oh, oh man, this is wonderful. Please feel free to ask. I'm also reviewing my notes to make sure I don't miss anything for you. Adia, is there anything that you might be thinking of that's important to articulate that I might be missing?
No, I think you, articulated your program phenomenally. Even sitting through an info session, running a separate program, I'm enlightened about how in session is run. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Let's see. Another thing I want to emphasize, I said the word earlier, but I think it's important to note is just being really clear about mutual accountability. We know like when you first start off a process, it's fun and it's sexy and it feels great. And we got this fellowship, it's awesome. Then life happens and people get busy and things happen, and we understand that as well. And so we think it's really important for you to be clear, for us to understand how that accountability exists between the two of you. Both is just a way to make sure that you don't have to hold something alone, but also to ensure that it feels like an equitable process is something that both of you are truly holding and feel like you are actualizing together. And so far, I've seen that happen in really beautiful ways. So I don't doubt that everyone here is capable of it, just based on how thoughtful your questions have been. But I think it's important to just make sure that that mutual involvement is clear. Anything else? Okay, well, in that case, I will say just a closing thought, which is in addition to just immense gratitude for you joining and asking all of the things that you did, please know that after this, you don't have to be a stranger. Like if you have questions that come up, we invite and welcome you to email us, and I'll just put this in the chat for easy reference. So please feel free to email should you have questions. Just know, give me a day or so. If it's the morning of and you have questions, I might not get to them in real time, but just give me a day or so to answer and reply, and I'll be happy to. If you need any feedback or if you're stuck somewhere, you have questions, always happy to be a resource. And yeah, we hope to hear from you, see your applications. If there's anything you need, by all means, please let us know. if you are around, I know it would be after the fact, but if you are around, if you look at our Instagram, or even if you go to Eventbrite, and I'll put this in the chat as well. The salon, our last salon for June is actually on June 20th, so it's the day after Juneteenth. And it'll be from 6:30 to 8, and you could come and experience one for yourself to get a feel of what one could look like. What the possibilities are. They really, when I tell you they run the gamut, they all look different, and are very representative of like each of the pairs in their own way. I wish you could have seen the other ones. But yeah, so if you are interested and you have time, please feel free to register. They're all free and open to the public as well. I didn't articulate that, but they are. And you can, yeah, come be a part. Would love to meet you. If anything comes up, just let me know. All right, y'all. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was so cool. This was like